This is the story of 23-year-old Krista Bramlett from New Providence, Tennessee, who was found dead in her mobile home during the time when she struggled to find a roof over her head. It took 22 years to solve her murder. Krista Renee Bramlett was born in 1973 in California to Jim Langley and Kim Venable. She was known to be smart, caring, and funny. She was close to her family but chose to be financially independent and lived alone. Krista and her mother had lived together in Clarksville until 1995, when Venable relocated to Texas with Krista's 2 children. Krista remained in Clarksville to complete her GED. She lived alone in Clarksville as she worked toward her high school equivalency, so she could make a better life for her 2 young children. Her neighbors called her aloof, but her family called her warm and loving. On Monday, October 28, 1996, Krista's landlord stopped by her mobile home to check on fire damage from the week before, when a trash can caught fire. Instead of looking at smoke damage, he saw her shoeless body lying in the flickering glow of a small color television in the living room. "Then I called the police," Jeff Pennington, the landlord, stated. At the time of Krista's death, Clarksville police were investigating the killings of several women who had been killed in their homes. Police insisted that the killings were unrelated to this case. With Krista's death, the investigation started with the Clarksville Police Department Crime Scene Unit processing the scene and an autopsy by the Montgomery County Medical Examiner. The autopsy found Krista died from suffocation, and a rape kit found evidence of an assault. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation developed DNA evidence, which was filed with the Combined DNA Index System. Around 6 detectives started with the neighbors, interviewing between 50 and 60 people to find potential witnesses. One neighbor said she saw Krista on October 27, 1996, sitting on her stoop like she always did. But Krista gave an aloof air, and people usually left her alone. Within a week, police had received nearly a dozen tips, and they hoped to have an arrest soon. But the leads didn't go anywhere. There were no potential suspects found, and the years flew by without any arrest. The investigation resulted in more than 1,500 pages of documents. After 22 years, in February 2019, Clarksville police got the call they had been waiting for so long for. There was a suspect in Arizona that matched the DNA from Krista's rape kit, 48-year-old Kenneth Hudspeth. Kenneth was unknown to police back in 1996, but they didn't suspect he could have had anything to do with Krista's death. CPD cold case detective Michael Ullery stated that Hudspeth's name had never surfaced in the initial investigation. Ullery interviewed Hudspeth, who admitted to being in Clarksville at the time of Krista's death and to being in her home on the day of her death. Further, Hudspeth did not refute any of the facts of the case as presented to him. Hudspeth lived in the trailer park at the time and moved just after Krista's death in 1997. He had been arrested several times over the years, but his DNA wasn't successfully processed until 2019. Hudspeth was taken into custody on April 16th by Phoenix police and charged with criminal homicide. He was extradited to Tennessee and booked into the Montgomery County Jail. He claimed he did drugs with Bramlett once before when he lived in the Sunnydale Mobile Home Park in Clarksville. Despite those claims, Bramlett's toxicology report came back clean, with a low blood alcohol concentration level. When he was asked if he had sex with her, he first refused. But when shown the autopsy results and the DNA found inside Bramlett and on her bra, he claimed that he was so doped up that he didn't remember if he killed or had sex with Bramlett. "I was on bad dope. I know her. Did I have sex with her? I mean, I don't remember that," said Hudspeth in the courtroom. He further added, "I just don't see myself raping and killing this woman. I hope I didn't." Bramlett's family members were notified as soon as the break in the case was confirmed. "I knew all along that it was just a matter of time. There was never any doubt in our minds that they would find who had done it," said Krista's grandmother. In January 2022, 50-year-old Kenneth Hudspeth was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison plus 20 years for the murder of Krista Bramlett. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. This is a story of 9-year-old Darylyn Johnson, whose murder almost resulted in a false execution of an innocent man. The mystery of her death was considered solved for most of 2 decades and then heart-wrenchingly re-emerged as a cold case in February 2001. It was 8 a.m. on the morning of February 24, 1982. Geraldine was walking 6 blocks from her home to Lincoln Elementary School, but she never made it. A massive search for the Nampa girl ended 3 days later when a fisherman found her body next to the Snake River in rural Canyon County. An autopsy revealed that the child had been sexually assaulted and had suffered blunt force injuries to her torso and her head. The police also collected male hair and male DNA from the crime scene. In September 1982, 34-year-old Charles Fain was arrested for Darylyn's rape and murder. Mr. Fain was arrested on the basis of a hair sample, which he gave voluntarily to the police. The fact that he lived a block away from the Johnson family added to his arrest. After being arrested, Fain denied any involvement in Darylyn's murder. He even passed a polygraph test. But despite his denial and passing the test, he was charged with the murder of Darylyn Johnson. At his trial, prosecutors mentioned that a shoe print found near the body could have been Fain's. In addition, 2 jailhouse informants testified that they had heard Fain admit to committing the crime, and in exchange for their testimony, the 2 informants received a reduced jail sentence. Despite this build-up against him, Fain remained firm on his argument that he was innocent. He claimed that he was 100 miles away from the block when Darylyn was murdered. His testimony was corroborated by other witnesses. Despite no solid evidence against Fain and no credible witnesses, the judge did not rule him out as a suspect. The results of his polygraph test were permitted as evidence in court, and the DNA technology back then wasn't advanced enough to prove Fain's innocence. On November 4, 1983, Fain was convicted, and in March 1984, he was sentenced to death. For nearly 2 decades, Fain was behind bars in isolation. Then came 1991. He was just 4 days away from being executed. But surprisingly, his execution was pushed back. In 1999, when DNA technology was a bit more advanced, it was determined that the hair and DNA found on Darylyn's body did not belong to Fain, but to an unknown man. He was then immediately exonerated. In August 1999, he was released from the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. Decades later, in 2019, investigators reopened the case. And in 2020, using genetic genealogy, they identified a 64-year-old suspect whose DNA matched the sample found at the crime scene. The suspect was David Dalrymple. He was already serving a 22-life prison sentence for kidnapping and abusing a child in February 2004. In January 2022, Dalrymple was formally charged with taking Darylyn's life. He now remains in prison, awaiting what will likely be another life sentence or the death penalty. On the other hand, Charles Fain is doing well and received a sum of $1,400,000 for the wrongful conviction. And with that amount, he recently bought a truck for himself. This is the case of the 11-year-old Laura Ann Heuser, who was abducted, sexually assaulted, and brutally murdered. The girl's face haunted a detective for years, and the agent admitted with his teary eyes that he would see the little girl every time he closed his eyes during those years. On November 6, 1986, Laura disappeared while she was walking home from a gas station in St. Lucie County, Central Florida. 3 days after she went missing, on November 9th, her dead body was found in a drainage ditch. Her body was immediately sent for an autopsy, and asphyxiation was listed as the cause of death. She had been raped and later strangled to death. The authorities launched an investigation into the murder, but they could not find any physical evidence from the crime scene. The killer murdered the juvenile victim and later altered the crime scene by placing the victim in a drainage ditch in an attempt to destroy all the physical evidence. This move of the killer hinted at his experience with dealing with crime and evidence. The police found traces of male DNA on Laura's body. The DNA was kept preserved in a sexual assault kit, as there was no one to match the DNA with. Back then, DNA technology and the criminal database were not advanced enough to provide the authorities with any lead to the killer. Laura's case eventually went cold in the files of the St. Lucie County Police Department. Nearly 4 decades later, Detective Paul Taylor with the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office reopened the case. I had already been through the crime scene photos, the case file, and what they're telling me does not match what I'm seeing, claimed Detective Paul. Taylor was able to reach out to the original witnesses who had first spotted Laura. The questioning of the witnesses led him to the fact that it was one of their own deputies who had turned the witnesses away and later moved the body. After the initial point when they found her, a detective showed up. He sent them away from the scene, and the witnesses were never contacted by law enforcement again. In February 2022, Detective Taylor revealed that it was their own former sheriff's deputy, James Howard Harrison, who was now their prime and only suspect in the killing of the 11-year-old. Harrison was also a church pastor and had worked for 10 separate law enforcement agencies since the 1960s. It was Harrison who saw Laura alive for the last time. He abducted her on the way, raped her, and after killing her, he dumped her body in the ditch. I am actually standing there in front of this victim's family, and I'm telling them that one of our deputies is the one who did it. It's rough, stated Detective Taylor. Investigators said Harrison had a pattern of inappropriate behavior with young women. Unfortunately, Harrison was not alive for the authorities to charge him for murder and rape. He died of cancer in February 2008, but the detectives got a warrant to exhume his body from the Oakeye Cemetery for a DNA sample. By then, however, his DNA was too deteriorated to match that found on Laura's body. Detective Taylor said that Harrison was forced to resign from the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office 5 months after the Laura and Hoyser homicide and was also forced to resign from his church because of his sexually inappropriate behavior with young adults. He had been previously accused of molesting children several times. For Laura's older brother, it was disbelief that his sister's killer was at last revealed. It naturally was like a dream. After all this time, you're telling me you're able to tell us who murdered our little sister, said her brother. The Hoyser family said that they are so grateful to Detective Paul Taylor, who solved this case with immense determination. But they were frustrated with what they believe was a shoddy investigation at the time Laura was killed. From our perspective, things were purposefully overlooked and not done. There were such humongous gaps in the investigation, claimed the Hoyser family. The police department now claims that they are reviewing their own cold cases around the state because they believe there were other victims of Harrison. What do you guys think? Did the former deputy use his authority as a deputy sheriff and his standing as a preacher in the community to commit crimes against children during the entire course of his life? How do we keep our women safe from these authoritarian men who manipulate the laws and the system for their own evil desires? August 5th, 1990. Asha Degree is born to parents Harold and Akila. She's their second child, and they live on 3404 Oakcrest Drive in Shelby, North Carolina. Asha was born into a deeply religious and close-knit family. Along with her older brother, O'Brien, they attended Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church every Sunday, which Asha loved. They lived on the same street as their Aunt Alicia and grandmother. She was also a talented basketball player, but her ultimate dream was to become an illustrator. On February 12, 2000, Asha played in a basketball game. It was important to her as it was the first game of the season, but her team suffered a defeat. Basketball was a big passion for Asha, and the loss upset her greatly. She blamed herself as she had fouled out during the game. That night, she stayed at her cousin's, and her mood started to improve. 2 days later, it was her parents' anniversary, Valentine's Day. Due to bad weather and a car crash, the house lost power that evening but regained it just after midnight. Harold was wide awake, so he stayed up to watch television. He checked on his children again at around 2:30 that morning. During the night, Asha's brother, O'Brien, heard her moving in her bed. He then heard her get up and go to the bathroom. At 5:45, Akila woke to run a bath for her children. When she went to wake them up, she realized Asha wasn't in bed. She assumed she had simply gotten herself up, but after realizing she wasn't downstairs and that her book bag and house key were gone, she started to panic. They called Asha's grandmother Joanne and Aunt Alicia to see if she was with them. When they confirmed that they hadn't seen her either, her family called 911. Just after 6:30 a.m., Sheriff Dan Crawford and officers from the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office arrived on scene and started their search. The State Bureau of Investigation also arrived to scour the area, and just after 2 p.m., the Degree House was cordoned off. Officers were stumped by the strange disappearance. Sniffer dogs were unable to pick up a scent, and there were no signs of a break-in or forced entry. The front and back door could be opened from the inside without a key, and there was no evidence of foul play in the house. The weather that night had been terrible, so why would a 9-year-old girl leave so suddenly? The police put a call out to local residents and neighbors to see if anyone had seen her, and by that afternoon, they had 2 separate leads. One of them was a 25-year-old truck driver who had seen her face on the news while having his lunch. He had been driving his truck down the highway when he noticed Asha walking by herself. He circled around 3 times. The second person who saw her was a former deputy with the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. He was trucking with his son and noticed a small figure walking along the highway. They didn't stop but put a call out to other truckers to be on the lookout. After speaking with his wife and realizing the possible connection to Asha, he went to the command post at Mulls Memorial Baptist Church to report the potential sighting. After checking the house, it appeared she had taken some candy, clothes, paper, and pencils along with her book bag. The police were baffled. Both investigators and her family couldn't understand why a mild-mannered and polite girl who followed the rules and had a happy home life would leave in the middle of the night. She was also terrified of dogs, and this would sometimes make her too scared to leave the house. The police widened the search to a 5-mile radius and carried on looking. It wouldn't be long before they found a potential trace of the missing Asha. Volunteers approached Raleigh and Debbie Turner and asked them to check their property for her. They owned an upholstery business, and on the plot of land stood an old, doorless shed that was about 300 feet off the road. After looking in the shed, they found wrappers that matched the candy she had been given at her basketball game. They also found a Minnie Mouse hair bow and a marker pen. Along with this, there was also a picture of a little girl. They handed the photo over to the police but believed the other items were too far away from the house to be Asha's. The following day, they turned the other items over to investigators. Her family immediately identified all of them, except one, as belonging to Asha. They had never seen the photograph before, nor did they recognize the little girl, and neither did anyone from Asha's school. Based on this, the police theorized that she had walked south down Highway 18, where she was seen running into the woods. Debbie Turner's upholstery was around 20 minutes from where she'd lived. On February 20th and 9,000 man-hours later, the official search was called off. The authorities had gone through the area with a fine-tooth comb but were confident that she wasn't there. In order to rule them out as suspects, her family undertook polygraph tests in March of that year, and they all passed. To offer an incentive for any information that would lead them to finding Asha, her family put their money together and raised money from the local community to offer a $5,000 reward. They also put up a billboard where she had last been seen in a desperate bid to generate any new leads. Also in March, Sheriff Crawford decided to re-interview Asha's brother and her friends. He called upon the expertise of Kimberly Poyer, who was renowned in interviewing children. Her friends offered nothing substantial but mentioned that Asha had shown them some money she had in her purse on February 10th. It is not known where the money came from or if it was still in her possession when she disappeared. February brought a twist to the case that nobody was expecting. A former classmate of Asha's mother, a man called Baron Ramsey, confessed to being involved in her disappearance. He said that he and another man had been taking part in a drug deal when they had accidentally hit Asha as she was walking down Highway 18. He said they knew instantly that she was dead and dragged her into the truck before driving to Moss Lake and dumping her body into the water. The police did 2 thorough searches of the lake but could find no trace of a body. They also went to where Ramsey said she had been hit and killed. They could find no evidence of an accident, nor any of Asha's blood. They believed he was trying to strike a better deal in an armed robbery case he was involved in, and as a result, he had made the whole thing up. Almost 18 months would pass before any new evidence came to light. August 2nd, 2001. Terry Fleming, a contractor, was doing work on a driveway along Highway 18. As he continued to dig up the ground, he found a black plastic bag. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And after he finally got it open, he saw what was inside. It was a beige and black book bag with the name Asha Degree written in it, alongside a phone number. He was unable to get service to call someone about it, so he wrote down the details and headed home. He mentioned what he had found to his wife the following morning. She instantly recognized the name and told him to contact the police straight away. According to Sheriff Crawford, the bag had been buried for some time and had also been double-wrapped. Law enforcement were coy about what exactly was in the bag, but Crawford said that 90 to 99% of the contents belonged to Asha. The Charlotte Observer reported that the items included clothing, a sheet of paper, and a pencil case. Authorities brought in cadaver dogs, which alerted to 3 spots close to where the bag had been found, but nothing would come of this. They also found a pair of men's khaki trousers, and it is unclear if they are related to the book bag. 1 year after Asha Degree had gone missing, Wayne Thomas, who was heading up the investigation into her disappearance, was fired. He had allegedly been withholding evidence relating to her case. He denied this and said he had been excluded from the investigation by other detectives. He would later be rehired after Dan Crawford's bid for re-election as county sheriff failed. More than 2 years after Asha Degree had disappeared, investigators started looking into a pair of brothers, who both had terrifying criminal records. Danny Ray Johnson had been charged with abducting a girl and raping her in the woods before leaving her tied to a tree. He also admitted to another attack on an 18-year-old girl days prior. His brother, Herbert Johnson, was also a convicted rapist and self-confessed murderer. After investigators found her bag, he was questioned. His violent track record and the fact he lived in the area at the time made him a person they wanted to talk to. He provided DNA and hair samples and said that when Asha had gone missing, his brother was in prison out of state and he had been in a psychiatric hospital. On September 16th, investigators said that Herbert and Danny Ray Johnson had, for now, been ruled out. January 12, 2015. A 52-year-old man called Donald Ferguson is arrested at his home in Spartanburg, South Carolina. He's being arrested on suspicion of a horrific murder from 1990. Shalonda Poole was a 7-year-old girl who had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and stabbed 19 times before her body was dumped behind Greensboro Elementary School in North Carolina. He had previously been arrested for the sexual assault of a 10-year-old girl in Spartanburg, but posted bail while awaiting trial and moved to Greensboro, where he met Shalonda. For 17 years, Shalonda's case would go unsolved. It wasn't until February 2007 that it was reopened. A forensics team pored over the evidence and were able to extract DNA. It was the DNA of Donald Ferguson. In February 2014, he pled guilty and was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The similarities between the cases of Shalonda and Asha led investigators to look at him as a possible suspect, but they have not yet officially linked him to her disappearance. In 2015, the FBI joined the case to try and find out what had happened to Asha Degree, and in February of that year, they joined forces with the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. A new lead came in May 2016 when someone reported seeing a Lincoln Continental Mark IV, or possibly a Ford Thunderbird near the area where Asha was last seen. In September 2017, the FBI enlisted the help of the Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team to assist in the investigation. On the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, investigators confirmed that more evidence had been found in Asha's book bag, a copy of Dr. Seuss McElligot's Pool, and a New Kids on the Block t-shirt. The book was from Asha's school, Falston Elementary, and had been checked out in early 2000. They do not believe that either item was in her possession when she went missing. There are several theories as to what could have happened to Asha Degree. One theory her parents put forward was that she could have been influenced by a book she had been reading in school. The Whipping Boy tells the tale of a boy whose job it is to take punishments for a prince. The pair decide to escape their trouble and run away during the night, embarking on an exciting adventure before returning to the kingdom by the end of the book. Maybe Asha had been inspired by this tale and wanted to take part in her own adventure. They also said that the basketball game from a few days before she had gone missing had been playing on her mind. While her mood had improved, she continued to talk about it, and it had obviously upset her a great deal. Maybe she had run away because she was struggling to deal with the loss of the game. Another theory is that Asha had possibly been groomed by an adult predator, posing as the girl in the photograph. Potentially, she had been lured out of her home by a trusted adult under false pretenses before going to meet them. The billboard still stands where Asha had last been seen running into the woods. It's to remind people of her and to encourage anyone with information to come forward. Every year, her family holds a walk in her memory and to ensure that her case is never forgotten. If you have any information relating to the disappearance or whereabouts of Asha Degree, then please contact either the FBI or the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. The tragic story began on the morning of March 18, 1964. Marie Chiavarella, a quiet girl from Hazleton, Pennsylvania, enjoyed playing the organ and aspired to be a nun. One day, she set out to bring some canned goods to her teacher at St. Joseph's Parochial School. She later planned to attend the morning mass, but Chiavarella never made it back. She was last seen walking east on West 4th Street at 8:10 a.m. Reports claim that on the cold morning of March 18th, while Marie was on her way back to the school, she was asked by neighbors to come in and get warm. But Marie refused, as she had to get back to her teacher with the goods. Neither the neighbors nor Marie could have anticipated that from that moment, Marie and her obedience would become history for the next 5.5 decades. Somewhere along her way, she crossed paths with evil. At approximately 1 p.m. the same day, a man noticed what looked like a large doll in a coal mining waste pit. When he looked closely, the doll was actually Marie Chiavarella. Her body was discovered north of Route 309 in Hazel Township, close to the Hazleton Airport. The investigation revealed Marie had been physically and sexually assaulted, murdered, and left at the scene with all her clothing and personal belongings. Before dumping her in the coal mining waste pit, the killer bound, gagged, raped, and strangled her. The discovery of her body shocked the entire Hazleton community. It was a heartbreak that was felt by everyone in the town, especially by the children. Children who were Marie's age started to feel afraid when they were alone or unescorted. The case changed the way people lived and how they approached their children's safety in the town. It didn't take long for the Pennsylvania State Police to begin their investigative efforts, which would ultimately last for decades. The authorities did not know that in this case, it would take years of grinding and scanning through databases just to get a lead to work on. There were no leads or suspects immediately after the killing. The police could not retrieve any useful evidence from Marie's body that could lead them to her killer. They had no idea that it would take them over 50 years to find a single lead. In February 2007, investigators were able to develop a DNA profile of the suspect from fluids left on Chiavarella's jacket. But the DNA didn't match any criminals in their system. They checked the database monthly against all other criminals that had DNA in the system, but there was no successful match. Then, in 2019, police tried a different approach and uploaded the DNA from Chiavarella's jacket to a genealogical database. This time, there was a match, but to what appeared to be a very distant relative. The DNA match was insufficient to place the relative into custody or charge him with murder. To generate public interest and garner leads in the case, in 2018, Pennsylvania State Police used the technology provided by Parabon Nanolabs to generate a snapshot phenotype facial prediction of the suspect from his DNA. The technology generated possible photos of the suspect at 3 different ages: 25, 40, and 60. The pictures were released to the public, but unfortunately, no witnesses came forward with any leads that could lead to Marie's killer. This was at a time when even Marie's parents had died. They did not live long enough to see what would unfold in Marie's mystery ahead. Her siblings said that her parents never sought revenge or punishment for their daughter's killer. They just wanted justice, but they did not live to see the end of this investigation. Finally, in 2020, the police got help from an unlikely source. An 18-year-old named Eric Schubert emailed the department and offered to build a family tree. He'd volunteered on other cold cases before, and police accepted his help since Eric was known as a hardworking boy and a genius genealogy wizard. Schubert identified a number of family members, many of whom voluntarily shared their DNA with the police. The family tree eventually led the police to Marie Chiavarella's killer, James Paul Forte. Forte was 22 years old at the time and had a criminal history of sexual assaults prior to Chiavarella's killing. Unfortunately, police could not prosecute Forte because he had already died in 1980 of a heart attack. Police exhumed his body in January 2022. A month later, they confirmed his DNA matched the fluids left on Chiavarella's jacket. This information was released to the press in a lengthy press conference by Pennsylvania police. For Chiavarella's surviving family, the news was bittersweet. Her sister, Carmen Marie Radke, stated that their family would always feel the emptiness and sorrow of Marie's absence. She added that they would continue to ask themselves what might have been on that fateful day. Her family also praised the persistent efforts of the Pennsylvania State Police, which gave them a sense of closure and peace regarding Marie's murder. The grit and determination of the police to solve this case were applaudable. They left no stone unturned to find the killer, and this was also a success story for 19-year-old Eric Schubert, who utilized his genius for the right purposes. But the question still remains. After 5.5 decades of investigation, when the killer was already buried in his grave, was justice actually served for Marie and her family? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The city of Pocatello is located in the northwestern state of Idaho. It's largely made up of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and is considered a safe, close, and tight-knit community. Known as the Gateway to the Northwest, for over 100 years, Pocatello has been home to tourists, travelers, and residents alike. It is a place that people are proud to call their home. However, in February 2006, the city of Pocatello would be at the center of one of the most horrific and disturbing murders in modern U.S. history. Just 4 days before Christmas in 1989, Cassie Jo Stoddart was born. She grew up in a secure and loving family who thought the world of her. She was a committed and straight-A student who kept out of trouble, had lots of friends, and was on the right path in life. As she was both reliable and trustworthy, her aunt and uncle, Allison and Frank Contreras, asked her to house sit for them and watch their pets while they were out of town. So on the evening of September 22, 2006, she headed over to the house. While at the home on Whispering Cliffs Drive in northeast Bannock County, she invited over her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, at around 6 p.m. Later in the evening, her school friends, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, who she went to Pocatello High School with, also visited. She gave them a tour of the house, and then they settled in to watch a film. The teens were halfway through Kill Bill Volume 2 when Brian and Tori said they were going to go to a cinema to watch a film instead. And with that, they left. While Cassie and Matt continued relaxing, without warning, the power went out. Unsure of what to do, Cassie became uneasy. But before long, the power came back on. Matt spotted one of the dogs staring down the basement stairs before it started to bark and growl, but he thought nothing more of it. Matt called his mother to see if he could stay with Cassie that night as she felt unsafe. His mother said no, but said that Cassie was welcome to stay with them. She declined, saying that she had been asked to look after the house by her family and felt obliged to stay. At around 10:30 p.m., Matt's mother arrived to collect him. Matt decided to see if Brian and Tori wanted to meet up, so he called them. As they said they were going to the cinema, Tori was whispering, so Matt couldn't hear what he was saying. Matt ultimately decided to stay at home. 2 days later, on Sunday, Cassie's family returned home to Whispering Cliffs Drive. Upon entering the house, Cassie's 13-year-old cousin was confronted by a horrific and traumatizing sight. Cassie was found on the living room floor, having been stabbed to death in a frenzied and brutal attack. The police quickly arrived on the scene and sealed off the area. An autopsy revealed that Cassie had been stabbed approximately 30 times, with 12 of the wounds being potentially fatal. 3 days after Cassie's body was found, the police announced they had made arrests in connection with her murder, and this would send shockwaves throughout this tight-knit community. Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk had been taken into custody and were being interrogated by investigators. People were stunned. These were not only classmates but trusted friends who Cassie enjoyed spending time with. Both boys were considered social outsiders, but Cassie had embraced and befriended them. Brian had spent most of his childhood in Utah before his family moved to Pocatello. It was at Pocatello High School that he met Tori Adamczyk, and they soon bonded over their mutual love of film. They used a camera to document different aspects of their lives, and Cassie soon featured in many of their recordings. On September 27th, after hours of interrogation, Brian Draper agreed to lead officers to where he and Tori Adamczyk had gotten rid of the items they had used in Cassie's murder. Among the items were a pair of black fingerless gloves, several knives, a partially burned mask, a Sony videotape, and a partially burned handwritten note. Police tried to decipher what the note said and were able to determine a few sentences, parts of which read, "Is home alone, stop out the house, runs into Tori, we murder Cassie, Brian chases her, kill her." The terrifying picture was starting to become clear. This had not been a spur-of-the-moment murder. This had been a carefully planned and executed crime, a fantasy that they had been determined to carry out. As the investigation continued, they uncovered more disturbing evidence against Brian and Tori. The pair had filmed Cassie on the morning of the murder when they were at school. Investigators also found footage of them gleefully talking about what it was they were about to do. The full horrors of what happened to Cassie Jo Stoddart that night had finally become clear. While at the house and giving them the tour, Cassie had shown them the basement. And before they left, Brian unlocked the door to ensure that he and Tori could re-enter the house without being noticed. After they said they were going to head to the cinema, they left the house and returned to the neighborhood later, parking down the street. They left the car and put on dark clothes, gloves, and masks before heading back to the home. They let themselves in through the unlocked basement door and cut the power at the circuit breaker, plunging the house into total darkness. They hoped that Cassie and Matt would come down to the basement to investigate, but when neither of them did, they turned the power back on. The dog that was growling and staring down the stairs had spotted the pair of them hiding in the basement. When Matt called to ask if they wanted to hang out, Tori was whispering so he wouldn't be discovered hiding inside the house. After they were sure that Matt had gone, the pair cut the power again. Brian opened and slammed a door at the top of the stairs. The aim was to scare Cassie as much as possible. They then terrorized her before brutally stabbing her to death. The disturbing details did not stop there. The police soon found the following footage. Tori Adamczyk and Brian Draper, two seemingly unremarkable 16-year-old boys, were charged with first-degree murder. During the interviews, the boys turned on each other. Brian initially said that while he had been in the room when Cassie was murdered, it was Tori who had stabbed her and not him. He later confessed to stabbing her but said that it was under Tori's orders. As the pair went on trial, the small city of Pocatello became the center of a national media firestorm. Journalists from all over the country had gathered to follow this disturbing case to its conclusion. The damning video footage was shown to the court. Stunned onlookers watched in silence as they saw how Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk had meticulously planned their crime and the glee they had taken in murdering their classmate and friend. One question that people wanted answered was why. Brian revealed that he had been inspired by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, who became internationally notorious when they carried out the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. Tori Adamczyk was said to be influenced by the classic horror film Scream. The first film focuses on a group of high school students who are terrorized and hunted by a masked killer. Part of the killer's modus operandi is they scare and terrorize their victims before brutally stabbing them. On April 17, 2007, Brian Draper was found guilty, and less than 2 months later, so was Tori Adamczyk. They were convicted of first-degree murder and received the mandatory life sentence of life without the possibility of parole. They also received 30 years to life for conspiracy to commit murder. The life sentences given to the pair could be reviewed, as the case of Miller versus Alabama declared that mandatory life sentences without the possibility of parole for juvenile offenders were unconstitutional. Since their sentencing, the pair have filed several appeals against their convictions. However, none so far have been successful. They are currently both serving their sentences in the Idaho State Correctional Institution. In the years following the murder, Brian and Tori have appeared in several documentaries about their crime. Tori Adamczyk was also interviewed as part of an episode of the true crime show Cold Justice. He was suspected of stabbing a woman to death in her own home in Pocatello, just 2 years before the murder of Cassie. Although DNA evidence would eventually rule Torey out, the police were able to gain further insight into him while they were investigating. They conducted a telephone interview with Brian Draper, who revealed some disturbing details about Torey's personality. Torey's mother, Shannon, has also written a book about her son's case called The Guilty Innocents. The book takes the reader behind the scenes of the trial. She argues that the prosecutors did not care about the truth but more about public opinion, and that the defense team her son had, who had never argued a murder case before, lacked the experience her son needed to fight his corner. In February 2010, Cassie's family launched a civil claim against the District of Idaho. They argued that Brian and Torey had long posed a threat and danger to others, and that the school had been negligent in failing to notice. The civil court dismissed their claim, as did the state Supreme Court, saying that the actions of the pair were not foreseeable. The devastation caused by the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddard is both irreparable and immeasurable. The day she was found in her aunt and uncle's house, the family left and never went back. The police helped tidy up the crime scene and provided temporary accommodation, but they could not bring themselves to re-enter the home. They have repeatedly tried to sell it but have not been able to find a buyer. Her devastated family have fought tirelessly, not only for justice but to ensure that the bright, funny, and hardworking Cassie will never be forgotten. Sion Emma O'Callahan was born on June 3, 1988 in Swindon, Wiltshire. She was described as a bubbly, friendly, and happy girl who adored her family and doted on her siblings. After leaving school at 16, she briefly attended her local college but quickly determined it wasn't the right path for her and went on to get a job as an office administrator, which she loved. March 18, 2011. Sion heads into town for a night out with some girlfriends. It's the start of the weekend and the end of the working week for Sion, and she's out to let her hair down and enjoy some drinks and dancing with friends. After some food and a few trips to local pubs, the last stop of the evening is the Sujo nightclub in Wiltshire, just half a mile from the flat she shared with her partner of a couple of years, Kevin. Early morning, Sunday, March 19th. Sion's mother, Elaine, is on a hotel mini break with her partner when she receives a concerning phone call from her son, Liam. Kevin has contacted him to see if he has heard from or seen Sion, as she hasn't come home. She's not answering her phone, and she's not active on social media. Although concerned, Elaine remains calm and decides to give it more time. She leaves several voicemails throughout the morning but receives no answer back from Sion. Just before 10 a.m., her partner, Kevin, raises the alarm with Wiltshire police. He is frantic with worry and desperate for answers. This behavior is totally out of character, and no one can make sense of it. She's officially reported as a missing person, and the investigation begins with Detective Superintendent Stephen Fulcher and his team in charge of the case. They begin with the people closest to her, her family and Kevin. Kevin tells the police that he returned home from some drinks with friends at around midnight. He called Sion to check on her, and she didn't pick up. Thinking nothing of it, he sent her a text message and then another at around 3:30 a.m. Phone records would corroborate this and would also confirm that Sion's phone was no longer ringing at all. Some of the friends that she was at Sujo nightclub with helped fill in the gaps. They said they had lost Sion at around 2:30 a.m. and, after looking for her, left shortly after, assuming she had simply gone home. After confirming what Sion was wearing that night, the police headed to Sujo to gather any camera footage they could. It doesn't take long for them to pick her up on the club's CCTV. Just before 3 a.m., they follow Sion as she is seen leaving the club and going down the street that would have been consistent with her route home. While the police were continuing to check the CCTV, missing persons flyers were being handed out, and the general public was helping in the search for Sion. Media outlets began to run the story, hoping to generate more witnesses and publicity for the case. Her family and partner made an emotional public appeal for answers, witnesses, and support. An anonymous donor offered a reward of £20,000 as the search intensified. Digging deeper into the footage along Sion's walk home, the cameras pick her up again. She is alone and walking down a deserted road. A few cars drive past her, and although she momentarily disappears from view, she is still just visible at the end of the street as the cars pass. At 2:37 a.m., another car pulls into view, but this one does not drive past her. The flashing of headlights indicates that the car's hazard lights are on. The car pulls over right to where Sion would have been at the time. After a few minutes, the car eventually pulls off and Sion is no longer in sight. Not on this camera, nor on any of the others further down the road. It becomes clear to the police that Sion is in that car. The same vehicle is picked up on other cameras a couple of hours before Sion had last been seen. It is a dark-colored Toyota with taxi markings and appears to be circling around the same area. The police launch an appeal to find the car and its owner. The reward for Sion is now sitting at £40,000, and the community continues to throw themselves into the case in any way they can. Thanks to a police car that had been driving around the same area at the same time, miraculously, the number plates of this mystery car had been scanned. It confirms a dark green Toyota Avensis, and it is registered to a taxi driver, 47-year-old Christopher Hallowell. Although he has no criminal past, the police are deeply concerned. He hadn't spoken to them and told them that he was the one that evidently picked her up. Meanwhile, Fulcher and his team are analyzing Sion's phone records and trying to find the current location of her LG E900 Optimus phone. The last cell phone tower ping puts the phone at the location of Southern Oak Forest. This is extremely concerning to the police, as it is close to 15 miles away from her last known location, yet the phone records put her there just 32 minutes after she left the club. There is no way she could have walked there, and there is no logical reason that Sion would have been there at 3:30 a.m. It is around this point that Fulcher requests the public to take a step back with their self-led searches, as the case is progressing very quickly, and he believes they are close to finding Sion. One of the police's final moves is to head to Hallowell's taxi firm to check the GPS data that is stored for all vehicles. This tracks where the taxis were and at what time, and this evidence would prove vital. On March 19th, Hallowell switched off his GPS at around 2:30 after clocking off for the night. Yet CCTV proves he remained in town, circling the streets. And just 2 days later, his GPS tracker shows him driving to where Sion lives. This information was not yet public knowledge and added more evidence to the already strong case against him. March 22nd. Cameras pick up Hallowell at a petrol station very late one evening. Upon paying for his petrol and sweets, his demeanor quickly changes, and he's visibly on edge. On the counter, a picture of Sion can be seen in the form of a missing persons poster. Hallowell turns his head away and covers her face on the poster with a packet of sweets. He then rushes out of the station and drives away. On day 6 of Hallowell's surveillance, the police follow him to an Asda supermarket, where he buys what would have been a lethal dose of over-the-counter painkillers. The team knows that they have to make their move now before it is too late. He is arrested in the car park of the supermarket. Detective Fulcher instructs his officers to drive Hallowell to Barbary Castle rather than to a police station. He wants to continue the immediate questioning in a non-threatening environment and believes that if Sion is still alive, this is the only chance they have of rescuing her. Over the next few hours, Fulcher perseveres, knowing that this is the man that abducted Sion, but he wants to hear it from Hallowell himself. Fulcher's hard work eventually pays off. Hallowell cracks and says he will take them to Sion. She is recovered almost 100 feet down a hill with stab wounds to the back of her skull and neck. It is confirmed she likely died from these injuries. It's unclear whether she was coaxed into the taxi that night under false pretenses of a safe lift home or whether she was forced in somehow. But the police speculate she could have fallen asleep in the car and only woken up when Hallowell had already driven her out to the forest. A fight ensued after Sion realized she was in danger, and Hallowell stabbed her to death. As the police stand by Sion's body, Hallowell utters the following words: "Do you want another one?" 20-year-old sex worker Becky Godden went missing back in February 2003. Hallowell had reportedly become fascinated with Godden after meeting her on his taxi routes in Swindon's red light district. In January 2003, after having sex with her, he strangled her and buried her body in a field in Gloucestershire. Although it was closure on 2 cases that had brought so much trauma to so many people, this line of questioning would see Stephen Fulcher found guilty of gross misconduct. and it meant that any evidence in the Godden case was deemed inadmissible in court. A separate and lengthy investigation was required to find further information to tie Hallowell to her. Fulcher would eventually resign from the police service in February 2014. He maintains to this day that it was the right and best thing to do for the case and the families, and says he doesn't regret his decisions. In September 2011, Christopher Hallowell was found guilty of the kidnap and murder of Siano Callahan, being handed a life sentence. And in March 2016, he was also found guilty of taking Becky Godden's life too. He is said to have laughed as the guilty verdict was read out, showing no sign of remorse, and grinned as he was led back to his cell. He is now serving the most severe sentence possible in British criminal law, a whole life order, meaning he will never be released and he will die behind bars. On April 18, 2011, over 500 people filled the streets of Swindon for Sian's funeral. Although it was a private ceremony, the funeral procession slowly drove through the town, giving the public the chance to pay their respects to her and grieve. Sian's vibrant, warm, and sociable personality was evident in how many people had turned out to pay their respects and honor her memory. This is the story of a sociopathic 16-year-old girl with antisocial personality disorder who plotted the murder of her family with her teenage lover and later went on to have sex with her accomplice while her house burned to ashes. The crime was so unimaginable and ugly that it shook the whole nation, and every parent wanted to know, what would make their children commit such a cruel act of violence? Erin Caffey, daughter of Terry Caffey and Penny Caffey, came from a conservative and protective family. She had two little brothers, Matthew Caffey, 13 years old, and Tyler Caffey, 8 years old. Her family began homeschooling her when she was 13 after they moved from Alba, Texas, to Celeste, Texas, so they could be closer to a conservative Baptist church where her parents worked as ministers while she sang in the choir. Her beautiful voice would sometimes move her audience and the church to tears. But for Erin, homeschooling was like an isolated existence for an otherwise social girl. She reportedly didn't have many friends, and her life was largely confined to the church and her parents' house, which she later tried to burn down. When Erin turned 16 in July 2007, she was allowed to work at the local Sonic. One of her co-workers observed that she was so sheltered, it was like she was seeing the world for the first time. That was where she met her soon-to-be boyfriend, 18-year-old Charlie Wilkinson. He was a high school senior and known as hot-tempered, but he had never been arrested previously and had no serious discipline problems at school. This was the first pivotal moment in her life. The kind and sweet Erin that her family and friends had known and loved so much slowly faded away. Nobody knew it yet, but at that moment, all their lives were changed forever. However, Erin's parents did not approve of Charlie. He had given them the impression of a rude, arrogant, and disrespectful 18-year-old, though it's debatable whether these traits might have been more Erin's than Charlie's. As time went on, Erin and Charlie's relationship grew intense and more passionate. They didn't care what anybody else thought about their relationship. They started spending more and more time together. It was almost like they became part of each other. In fact, they had only been dating for a few months when Charlie presented Erin with his grandmother's engagement ring. You know how it is to be young and in love. Your brain gets foggy, all common sense goes out the window, and sometimes it's hard to see what is so clear to everyone else around you. As Erin began to shut everyone out of her life except Charlie, secluding herself from the rest of the church and engaging in inappropriate PDA, her parents also began noticing these changes in her behavior. This absolutely infuriated Terry and Penny, and from then on, the Caffeys limited Erin's time with Charlie to once a week, in their home and under their watch. Charlie had to leave by 9 p.m., and Erin could use her cell phone to talk to him only until 10 p.m. These restrictions made Erin furious, and she planned to run away with Charlie. In February, Erin was grounded for talking to Charlie without permission and had her keys and phone taken away. Eventually, it became clear to her parents that this relationship would continue to cause problems as long as it continued. Penny put her foot down and asked Erin to stop seeing Charlie. Allegedly, this was the moment when Erin decided that drastic steps were needed so that she and Charlie could finally be together with nobody around to disrupt them. Maybe this was the moment when the seeds of a highly dangerous idea took root in Erin's mind, and her parents were unaware of the barbaric thoughts making a home in her consciousness. Terry and Penny thought that, with grounding restrictions and ending the relationship, they had fulfilled their parenting responsibilities. But they had no idea they were ignoring Erin's increasingly obsessive antisocial behavior and what it would lead to. And so came the early morning of March 1st, 2008, when the Caffey family would not see the sunrise. It was 2 a.m. when a loud bang, their bedroom door being forced open, woke Terry and Penny. The two little kids, Matthew and Tyler, were asleep upstairs. Two intruders burst into the couple's bedroom and opened fire, shooting them several times. Bullets showered the bedroom, and before Terry and Penny could process what was happening, they were shot multiple times. It was a horror they had never imagined. To save Penny, Terry jumped on her and took 2 bullets to his face. Not only did the intruders break in shooting hysterically, but they also carried 2 samurai-style swords. After Terry was struck in the face, he was flung out of bed, and the intruder shot Penny several more times. Then they shot Terry 3 more times in the back and once in the back of the leg. In total, Terry was shot 11 times. He couldn't feel the right side of his body, and when he tried to speak, nothing came out. Then one of the killers took a sword and stabbed Penny in the neck, nearly decapitating her. Terry panicked, thinking of his children asleep upstairs. He knew they would wake up. As he tried to get up, he heard Matthew cry out, "No, Charlie, no. Why are you doing this?" It was Erin's boyfriend, Charlie, along with his friend, later identified as Charles Wade, trying to murder the whole family. When Terry heard Charlie's name, he knew who was in his house and why. Then he heard a gunshot. He tried to get up, but as blood rushed to his head, he collapsed. Matthew had been shot dead. Meanwhile, Tyler rushed to hide in the closet, but Wade found him, and both took turns stabbing him to death. Once Charlie and Wade were sure they had killed everyone, they took out their pocket lighters, set the house on fire, and fled the scene. It was a horrifying sight. A family slaughtered and a house burning to ashes. As Charlie and Wade escaped, they expected all family members to die. But Terry Caffey miraculously survived. "I knew I couldn't get upstairs because the flames were pushing me back into the bedroom. So I crawled on the bed and found Penny. She was already gone. I finally managed to crawl out our bathroom window and drag myself away from the house," Terry said. Roughly 2 hours passed from the start of the attack until Terry crawled 300 yards through the woods to neighbor Tommy Gaston's house. When Gaston called 911, the operator asked where Terry was bleeding. Gaston replied, "Where isn't he bleeding from? It's a miracle he's here at all." Terry was taken to East Texas Medical Center in Tyler and admitted to the critical care unit. In the ambulance, he named his daughter's boyfriend, Charlie Wilkinson, as the killer. In rural communities as small as Alba, there are no strangers. Upon hearing Charlie's name, Chief Deputy Kurt Fisher realized Charlie was a friend of his son. Fisher had gone fishing and four-wheeling with Charlie many times before. He told detectives he had spotted Charlie's car parked outside Matthew Wade's trailer. Matthew Wade was the brother of Charlie's accomplice, Charles Wade. He was a few years older than Charlie, and he and Matthew sometimes drank at his trailer. The detectives immediately rushed to Matthew Wade's trailer. As they arrived, a teenager Fisher didn't recognize groggily came to the door. He wasn't sure if Charlie had spent the night there, but agreed to let the officers in. Fisher walked from room to room, stepping over piles of dirty laundry and empty beer cans. Wade and his girlfriend were woken by the officers. Fisher said he needed to talk to Charlie Wilkinson. As he continued down the hall, he saw a blanket covering an empty door frame. Pulling it back, he shone his flashlight inside and saw Charlie lying awake on a mattress, wearing only blue jeans, with a semi-automatic handgun on the floor beside him. Worried Charlie might reach for the gun, Fisher ordered him to show his hands, led him outside in handcuffs, and sat him on the porch. The officer told Charlie that the Caffey family had been attacked and killed earlier that morning. Charlie hung his head and stayed silent. "Were you involved in this?" Fisher asked. "No, sir. I got drunk last night and passed out," Charlie said, shaking his head. Deputy Emmett went inside to get Charlie's shirt and cowboy boots. As he carried them out, he noticed they were spattered with blood. The officers put Charlie in the squad car, where he stared out the window in silence as they drove through the pre-dawn gloom toward Emory. After Charlie was brought to jail, officers obtained a search warrant and returned to the trailer to collect evidence. They found a purse with Aaron's driver's license. As they sifted through clutter, they saw a tuft of blonde hair peeking out from a pile. Assuming it was a doll, they grabbed the hair, and to their shock, it was a teenage girl curled in a fetal position, facing away. The officer demanded she show her hands and stand up. From the driver's license, he recognized her as Erin Caffey. Erin immediately asked where she was, claiming she didn't remember how she got there. She said she had been drugged the night before and only remembered a fire, 2 men in black with swords, and drinking something. After that, everything was blurry. The officers initially felt sorry for Erin and praised her strength. But as the story unraveled, it would become clear that this wasn't the case. Erin was taken into custody and sent for a physical exam. With no trace of drugs in her blood and no sign of smoke inhalation, it was soon confirmed that Erin had lied about what happened that night. Though Terry believed Charlie did this for revenge, Charlie's version differed. He claimed he did it for love, not rage, because Erin asked him to. Charlie soon named his accomplices, Charles Wade and his girlfriend, Bobby Johnson. They had been promised $2,000 by Erin. Within 24 hours, all 4 suspects, Charlie Wilkinson, Charles Wade, Erin Caffey, and Bobby Johnson, were in custody and talking. According to the boys, Charlie, Erin, and Wade were driven to the Caffey home by Bobby. They wandered around the house for a long time before being scared off by the family dog, which started barking loudly. Erin called Charlie repeatedly, forcing him to come back and kill her parents. She said she would bring the dog inside so it wouldn't wake anyone. When the boys hesitated, Erin snuck out in her pajamas. Bobby drove them to a cemetery, where they sat for an hour planning the murders. Charlie said he tried to convince Erin to run away with him instead, but she insisted she wanted her family permanently gone, including her little brothers, whom she called annoying. They drove back to the house. This time, Erin handled the dog and waited in the car with Bobby while Charlie and Wade carried out the murders. Once Erin confirmed her parents were dead, she gave Bobby and Wade the combination to the lockbox where the money was kept. They also took $400 from Terry and Penny's wallets. As the plan unfolded, Erin's reaction was, "Holy shit, that was awesome." She celebrated her family's deaths by sleeping with their killer that same night. Erin was arrested but denied plotting the murders. As a minor, she couldn't be questioned without consent, so she wrote a statement claiming Charlie forced her into it. She was sent to juvenile detention on murder charges. On January 2nd, 2009, she was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 25 years for capital murder. Charlie and Wade received life without parole. Bobby was sentenced to 40 years. Terry Caffey, the only survivor besides Erin, still visits his daughter in jail and fights for her early release. To this day, he can't believe she could do such a thing. Perhaps because, during visits, Erin has told him a different story of her innocence. Terry later remarried and now has 1 biological child and 3 adopted children. He wrote a book about that night, Terror by Night, The True Story. Erin's case is an alarming example of teenage mental health issues pushed to the extreme. She showed signs of antisocial personality disorder for years, but her parents didn't recognize the severity. What do you think? Was this bad parenting? A teenage romance gone wrong? Or a sociopath manipulating her boyfriend for evil desires? Let us know in the comments. Let us start the story with some background on Elizabeth's father, the Austrian pensioner Joseph Fritzl. He was an oppressive patriarchal figure in the family, and the fact that his daughter wanted to go out with her friends, party, kiss her boyfriends, and live her life bothered him to such an extent that he eventually took up criminal means to put chains around her. ISF's grandfather had been married to a woman who couldn't conceive children. Because of this, the grandfather would have affairs with other women and then would coerce his wife into adopting the children they bore. Joseph's mother was one of those children whom a trial lawyer described as unloving and sadistic. It's common that child abusers have often suffered child abuse themselves, and the people who mistreat other people have often been mistreated in various ways themselves. This is no excuse or a justification for the monstrous acts of Joseph, but just a speculation of what could have triggered his descent into pure evil. Monsters are not created overnight. They are bred and fed over the generations. With that in mind, let us look at what happened to Elizabeth Fritzl during those 24 years in a basement and how it all began. On August 28, 1984, 18-year-old Elizabeth Fritzl went missing. Frantic over the whereabouts of her daughter, Rosemary hastily filed the missing persons report. For weeks, there was no word from Elizabeth, and her parents were left to assume the worst. Then, out of nowhere, a letter arrived from Elizabeth claiming that she had grown tired of her family life and ran away. Her father, Joseph, told the policeman who came to the house that he had no idea where she would go. He told the police that she has most likely joined a religious cult, something she had talked previously about doing. But the truth was that Joseph Fritzl knew exactly where his daughter was. She was about 20 feet below where the police officer was standing. Elizabeth was a girl full of dreams and aspirations, and she grew tired of her father consistently imposing harsh restrictions on her. She had previously expressed to her mother and her sister about her interest in leaving the family, traveling around the country and starting a new life on her own as soon as she would turn 18. ISF overheard this conversation and decided to do something about it. On August 28, 1984, ISF called his daughter into the basement of the family's home. He was refitting a door to the newly renovated cellar and needed help carrying it. As Elizabeth held the door, ISF fixed it into place. As soon as it was on the hinges, he swung it open, forcing Elizabeth inside and knocking her unconscious with an ether-soaked towel. For the next 24 years, the inside of the dirt-walled cellar would be the only thing Elizabeth Fritzl would see. Her father would lie to her mother and the police, feeding them stories about how she had run away and joined a cult. Eventually, the police investigation into her whereabouts would run cold, and before long, the world would forget about the missing Fritzl girl. But ISF Fritzl wouldn't forget, and over the next 24 years, he would make that very clear to his daughter. For the rest of the Fritzl family, Joseph was a hardworking husband and a father who was thoroughly dedicated to his career. For them, he would head down to the basement every morning at 9 a.m. to draw plans for the machines that he sold, and occasionally, he would spend the night there. ISF's wife never doubted the actions or the intentions of her husband, since she didn't know what disgusting acts were happening right beneath her feet. At the minimum, ISF would visit his daughter in the basement 3 times a week. Usually, it was every day. For the first 2 years, he left her alone in captivity. Then, he began to rape her, continuing the nightly visit he had begun when she had not even entered the adult phase of her life. 2 years into her captivity, Elizabeth became pregnant, and she miscarried 10 weeks into the pregnancy. 2 years later, she fell pregnant again, this time carrying to term. In August of 1988, a baby girl named Kirsten was born, and 2 years later, she gave birth to another baby boy named Stefan. Kirsten and Stefan remained in the cellar with their mother for the duration of her imprisonment, and ISF brought weekly rations of food and water for them. Elizabeth attempted to teach them with a rudimentary education she herself had, and gave them the most normal life she could under their horrific circumstances. Over the next 24 years, Elizabeth Fritzl gave birth to 5 more children. 1 more was allowed to remain in the basement with her. 1 died shortly after birth, and the other 3 were taken upstairs to live with Rosemary and ISF. In order to conceal what he was doing from Rosemary, he staged elaborate discoveries of the children. He often placed them on bushes near the home or sometimes on the doorstep. Each time, the child was swaddled neatly and accompanied with a note allegedly written by Elizabeth claiming that she couldn't take care of the baby and was leaving it with her parents for safekeeping. Shockingly, social services never questioned the appearance of the children and allowed the Fritzls to keep them as their own children. Officials, on the other hand, remained under the impression that Rosemary and Joseph were the baby's grandparents. It is not known for how long Joseph Fritzl intended to keep his daughter captive in his basement. He had gotten away with it for 24 years, and for all the police knew, he was going to continue probably for another 24. However, in February 2008, one of the children in the cellar fell ill. Elizabeth begged her father to allow her 19-year-old daughter, Kirsten, to get medical attention. She had fallen rapidly and critically ill, and Elizabeth was beside herself. Grudgingly, ISF agreed to take her to a hospital. He removed Kirsten from the cellar and called an ambulance, claiming that he had a note from Kirsten's mother explaining her condition. The police eventually grew suspicious of Joseph and reopened the investigation into Elizabeth Fritzl's disappearance. They began to read the letters that Elizabeth had supposedly been leaving for the Fritzls and began to see inconsistencies in them. Police questioned Kirsten and also asked the public for any information on her family. Naturally, no one came forward as there was no family to speak of. Whether ISF finally felt the pressure or had a change of heart regarding his daughter's captivity, the world may never know. But on April 26, 2008, he released Elizabeth from the cellar for the first time in 24 years. She immediately went to the hospital to see her daughter, where hospital staff alerted police to her suspicious arrival. That night, she was taken into custody to be questioned about her daughter's illness and her father's story. After making the police promise that she never had to see her father again, Elizabeth Fritzl told the tale of her 24-year imprisonment. She explained that her father kept her in a basement and that she bore his 7 children. She explained that ISF was the father of all 7 of them and that ISF Fritzl would come down during the night, make her watch pornographic films, and then rape her. She explained that he'd been abusing her ever since she was 11. The police arrested Joseph Fritzl that very same night. After the arrest, the children in the cellar were also released and Rosemary Fritzl fled the home. She had allegedly known nothing about the events taking place right under her feet, and ISF backed up her story. The tenants who had lived in the apartment on the first floor of the Fritzl home also never knew what was happening right beneath them, as ISF had explained away all the sounds by blaming faulty piping and a noisy heater. Prior to his trial, ISF confessed to the repeated rapes, claiming that the rape of his daughter was an addiction and the redirection of incestuous feelings he felt towards his own mother. He also claimed to be a loving, attentive father to the children he sired in the basement, bringing them books and stuffed animals, watching videos and eating dinner with the children just like a family. At the trial, the father admitted guilt on an incest charge but pleaded innocent to enslavement and to the murder of his child. After he saw Elizabeth's taped testimony, he changed his plea to full guilt, acknowledging that his failure to secure medical care for the newborn may have directly contributed to the death. For his crimes, Fritzl was found guilty on all counts: negligent murder, enslavement, incest, rape, coercion, and false imprisonment. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in February 2009. He has been in solitary confinement in Austria's Kremenstein prison since that time. According to Austrian media, he now suffers from dementia and none of his family has visited during his decade behind bars. Today, Elizabeth Fritzl lives under a new identity in a secret Austrian village known only as Village X. The home is under constant CCTV surveillance and police patrol every corner. The family doesn't allow interviews anywhere within their walls and has declined to give any information about themselves. Though she is now in her mid-50s, the last photo taken of her was when she was just 16 years of age. How do you form an intimate relationship after the people who are supposed to protect you have done so many horrible things to you? What do you guys think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. In 1999, Breck Bednar and Lauren Lefebvre welcomed their son, Breck, into the world. Lauren and Barry were both originally from the United States, but had moved to the United Kingdom. He was advanced with technology well beyond his years, and would spend his free time gaming with friends online. A friend of Breck's from his church youth group introduced him to an exclusive online gaming club. His mother soon began to notice a change in his behavior. She said he started becoming more negative and withdrawn. He would refuse to go to church and retreated more into his online world. His mother was aware that he was talking to someone online and became so concerned that she limited his access to electronics and stored parental blockers on his computer, and also prohibited him from using the same server as this elusive online man. This shadowy online presence would control the gaming group, and members would communicate using only their voices. No matter what his mother tried, the man would always find his way back into Breck's life. He would tell him stories that he was a millionaire who donated millions in Bitcoin to help Syrian rebels fighting in the civil war. He told Breck that he wouldn't need to stay on in school or go to university, as he would secure him a job in the computer technology industry that would earn him hundreds of thousands of pounds. Lauren became so disturbed by the power this man had over her son's life that in February, she called the police. She explained that her son was being February 2nd in February 2014. Breck was due to spend the weekend at his father's house. As time ticked by and Breck failed to show, Barry contacted Lauren to tell her that their son had failed to arrive. A few hours later, his younger siblings' phones began to blow up. The 12-year-old triplets were receiving messages that their brother had been murdered and that a photo of his body was circulating around social media. His death was later confirmed by the police after emergency services had tried their best to save his life. It soon became clear what had happened that fateful weekend. He had been convinced by the man he'd been talking to online to go to Essex to meet him. Breck took a taxi and traveled to Rosebery Road in Grays. When he arrived, he was overpowered, and duct tape was used to tie his ankles and wrists. He was then repeatedly stabbed in the neck. After this, his killer called 999. This was the voice of the man who had groomed Breck over the last several months. The man who had tormented Breck's parents and had now taken their son's life. But this man was no older than a teenager. He was 18-year-old Louis Daines, an unemployed computer engineer who was described as introverted and reclusive. When they arrived, police found encrypted electronic equipment that Daines had submerged in water in a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. They found Breck's blood-stained clothes in a plastic bag, and even a number of messages that Daines had sent him detailing what he should say to his father if he asked where he was going. Louis Daines was arrested and charged with 1 count of murder. Before a jury could be sworn in, Daines confessed. He was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 25 years, which he must serve before he can be considered for parole. Breck's family were awarded an undisclosed financial sum and an apology from Surrey police for the way they handled the case when Lauren had initially reported that her son was being groomed. In the aftermath of his death, his family set up the Breck Foundation. The aim of the foundation is to help children and young people be more aware of online dangers and promote responsible use of the internet. Through the work of the foundation, the memory of Breck Bednar continues to live on. Christmas Day, 1976. Penny Cayedito and Antoine Montoya received the best holiday surprise they could have asked for: the birth of their daughter, Antoinette Christine. After her parents' relationship ended, Antoinette and her younger sisters, Sadie and Wendy, lived with their mother in Gallup, New Mexico. On April 6, 1986, Penny had been out having drinks at the local bar with friends. While her daughters were being looked after by a baby around midnight, she sent the babysitter home and headed to bed. When Penny awoke that morning, she went about getting her children up and ready for Bible school, and she realized that Antoinette was not in her bedroom. She checked the house and asked the neighbors if they'd seen her. When it became apparent that she was gone, Penny called 911. Police and volunteers searched tirelessly throughout the area, but could find no trace of the missing Antoinette. The police said they believed she had possibly been kidnapped, and there was little chance of her being found alive, and the trail soon went cold. 1 year after Antoinette had gone missing, the Gallup police received this 911 call. When Penny heard the call, she was certain that it was her missing daughter. She said the way that she pronounced her name was distinctive and knew instantly that it was her. She didn't recognize the man's voice that could be heard just before the call cut off. The police desperately tried to trace the call, but were unsuccessful, and this would prove to be another lead that went nowhere. As the investigation stalled again, 5 years after she had gone missing, the police released age progress pictures of what Antoinette could look like, and this led to a witness coming forward. She explained that she had been working as a waitress when she served a table consisting of a man, woman, and teenage girl, approximately 14 or 15 years old. Teenage girl, approximately 14 or 15 years old. She said they were all unkempt, possibly as a result of struggling with the teenager. She said that the girl repeatedly dropped her cutlery on the floor, and when she tried to pick them up for her, the young teen grabbed her hand. The waitress brushed it off, but when she went to clean their table after they had gone, she found a note. Hidden under her plate and written on a napkin, it read, "Please help me. Call the police." This potential sighting, coupled with the 911 call, brought renewed hope to the family that their beloved Antoinette was still alive. Investigators decided to re-interview key witnesses that were involved in the case. They spoke to her sister Wendy, age 10, who was 5 when Antoinette had gone missing, and she gave the police a new version of events. She revealed that she had actually witnessed Antoinette's abduction. She told the police that on the night she had gone missing, she and Antoinette were still awake after their mother had gone to bed. According to Wendy, they'd heard a knock at the door at around 3 o'clock in the morning. Her sister Antoinette went up to the front door and asked who it was. A man replied, "It's Uncle Joe." When she opened the door, she was grabbed by 2 men who dragged her out to a brown van. Antoinette kicked and repeatedly screamed at them to let go of her. She was then bundled into a van, and it drove off into the night. They asked her why she hadn't told them this at the time. She explained that she had been so traumatized by what she had seen, and that she didn't want to get into trouble. The investigators realized that there was an Uncle Joe in the family. He was married to Penny's sister. He was cleared, but it led the police to think that the abductors knew the family and used a name that Antoinette would recognize in order to get her to open the door. The police also turned their attention to Penny. She had failed a lie detector test, and this led investigators to believe that she knew more about her daughter's disappearance than she'd let on. In the weeks after her daughter had gone missing, she'd made expensive purchases, including a new car, and was allegedly involved in selling drugs. They attempted to question her again in the late 1990s, but Penny died in hospital before they could interview her. It has been 33 years since the young girl made that desperate call to 911 saying that she was the missing Antoinette Caedito. But to date, no trace of her has ever been found. Her fate remains unknown. If you have any information relating to the disappearance or whereabouts of Antoinette Caedito, then please contact the FBI. As the February was coming to an end, a woman was walking her dog through the graveyard of St. Margaret of Antioch's Church in the East London district of Barking when she came across the lifeless body of a man. He was young, in his 20s, and propped up in the graveyard. 3 weeks later, she was walking through the same graveyard when she found another body. This too was a man in his 20s, propped up in the same position. The young men were named as Gabriel Kovari and Daniel Whitworth. Both were gay, and despite the near-identical circumstances surrounding their deaths, the police ruled them both as non-suspicious drugs overdoses. A suicide note was found with the body of Daniel Whitworth. It explained that he and Kovari had taken drugs together, and that Kovari had died of an overdose. Ridden with guilt, Whitworth had then taken his own life. In September 2015, another body was found. He was young, gay, and propped up against the wall in the same graveyard. He was named as Jack Taylor, and he too, like Gabriel Kovari and Daniel Whitworth, had died of a drugs overdose. 3 bodies in the same area, all young and all gay men. Before the bodies of Kovari, Whitworth, and Taylor were found, in June 2014, Barking. When they arrived, the emergency services found a young man, props up against the wall. He was declared dead on scene. There were no signs of foul play, but his shirt had been pulled up, as if he had been dragged in position there. His mobile phone was also missing. The young man was named as Anthony Walgate, a young fashion student studying at the University of Middlesex. The police were desperate to find the anonymous 999 caller, and they soon discovered he was a man called Stephen Port. They ran into his flatmates outside, and when the police entered 62 Cook Street, they found Port asleep in bed. He gave the police a witness statement, saying that he had come home from a night shift and found an unconscious man lying in front of his door. He said he had slapped him in the face to try and wake him up, but after getting no response, he propped him against the wall and called 999. He didn't wait for the emergency services to arrive. Instead, he hung up, went inside, and then fell asleep. The police found out that Anthony Walgate had been hired as an escort by Port. Anthony was cautious and had told his friends where he was going and gave them a photo of the man he was meeting. After calling his statements into question, the police arrested him on suspicion of attempting to pervert the course of justice. They also believed that he had Anthony's missing phone. They searched his flat and seized his laptop, as well as taking samples of his DNA. Anthony's friends begged the police to look further into his death. A year later, and with now 4 dead men, the Metropolitan Police Force issued a photograph of Jack Taylor with a tall, blonde man that they wanted to identify. He was instantly recognized by a barking police officer as none other than Stephen Port. On the October 15, 2015, Port was arrested at his flat on suspicion of causing 4 deaths by use of poison. 3 days later, he was charged with murder. News of Port's arrest began to spread, and more people were coming forward to help build a picture of who this man was. He was described as introverted and childlike, a man who kept himself to himself. It also became clear that Stephen Port was a serial rapist and dangerous sex offender, with a string of instances where he had drugged and raped various men. 8 men came forward and described meeting Port online before being drugged and sexually assaulted by him. This was the same modus operandi he had used with the 4 men he had murdered. He would set up a meeting after contacting them online or on an app. He would then drug and sexually assault them before dragging their bodies out of his flat. The handwriting of the suicide note left with the body of Daniel Whitworth was analyzed, and it was determined that Daniel hadn't written the note. Stephen Port had. It was one part of the web of lies and deceit that he had strung in order to cover his tracks, including calling 999 having just murdered Anthony Walgate. Stephen Port was a serial killer. Detective Chief Inspector Tim Duffield, who led the investigation into Port, said he was one of the most dangerous men he had ever encountered. Stephen Port was given the most severe sentence possible in British criminal law, a whole life order, meaning he will never be released and he will die behind bars. The friends and family of Gabriel Cavari, Jack Taylor, Daniel Whitworth, and Anthony Walgate fought tirelessly to have the police answer their questions. How could they have 4 bodies in the same area with the same profile, all dying from the same cause, without the cases being linked? And the victims' families have also launched a civil claim against the Metropolitan Police Force. While Stephen Port will die in prison, the devastation he caused is immeasurable and irreparable, and his staggering arrogance and callousness is no more apparent than in that 999 call. On the September 11, 2014, 3-year-old William Tyrrell made a 4-hour drive with his 5-year-old sister and foster mother. They were traveling to his foster mother's parents' house. His foster grandmother lived on Benaroon Drive, across the road from Kendall State Forest. The following day, he and his sister were playing hide and seek when this photograph of him was taken, of him in his Spider-Man costume. He and his sister were having fun in the garden, so his foster mother and foster grandmother went inside to make a drink. His foster mother realized after a few minutes that it had gone quiet outside, and when she went back to check on him, little William had gone. At 10:56, she called 0 to report him as missing. Just 10 minutes later, the police arrived on scene. She told them the last thing she remembered was hearing William imitate a tiger's roar before he ran to the side of the house. She explained that she had searched everywhere for him, but could find no trace. Hundreds of people made it by the police, state emergency services, and concerned members of the public joined in the search for William Tyrrell. Helicopters were drafted in to scour over the rugged surrounding area, and 200 volunteers searched throughout the night. After 5 days, the police announced they had no verifiable leads. Later, the police started looking into 2 cars that had been spotted on the road on the morning that William had disappeared. They were described as a white station wagon and a gray sedan. They were allegedly parked between 2 drive on the acre lot of land. They were seen with the driver's side windows down, and the neighbors didn't recognize either of them. Neither car has been seen again since William disappeared. At 9 a.m. the morning that William went missing, the sedan drove down the road before doing a U-turn and pulling away. Another Ford WD was spotted driving out of the road at approximately 10:30, around the time William is believed to have gone missing. and the same car was seen speeding down Kendall Street shortly after. More than 1,000 suspected sightings were reported to the investigation team in the 2 years after Willie and Tyrell disappeared, as well as numerous false alarms. In September 2014, a task force was established to tackle the unsolved disappearance, called Strike Force Roseanne. It was made up of 14 investigators and analysts working around the clock to try and discover what had happened to William. The investigation is now the state's largest, consisting two, which provides assistance from the armed holdup of sex crimes and fraud squads. The police cleared William's family of any involvement in his disappearance. Since his foster mother placed that desperate call to emergency services, no trace of William Tyrell has ever been found, and his case remains unsolved. If you have any information relating to the disappearance or whereabouts of William Tyrell, then please contact either Crime Stoppers Australia or the New South Wales Police. October 10, 2016. A 999 dispatcher receives a call that everyone in the emergency services dreads. It's a request for an ambulance for a 2-year-old girl. She's not breathing, and she's not responding. The call is made by her mother, 20-year-old Cody and Jackson. The police and paramedics rushed to the scene, and after breaking down the front door, they were confronted by a horrific sight. 2-year-old Macy was on the bedroom floor, and her mother had been attempting CPR. What became clear was that Macy had been dead for some time before the call to 999 had been made. Her mother, Cody and Jackson, told the paramedics that her and her daughter had been co-sleeping, and Macy had died during the night, and she hadn't realized until she'd woken up the next morning and found her cold body. As her daughter lay on the bedroom floor and before the ambulance was called, Jackson had made a failed suicide attempt by taking an overdose of migraine tablets, as well as self-harming with 2 kitchen knives. She'd also written a suicide note which read, "There's nothing for me or Macy." It was now the task of investigators to try and piece together exactly what had happened and how Macy's life had ended. Was it an accidental tragedy or something far more sinister? They sealed off the area and set about looking more closely into Jackson and her background. Jackson had recently split with Macy's father, Paul, just a few days before. They had met at a house party in February 2013, and while she had fallen pregnant within just a few months, they were delighted to be having their first child together. However, this happiness was not to last as their relationship proved toxic. Paul ended up leaving the family home as he did not want his daughter to see her parents fighting all the time. In the weeks and months leading up to Macy's death, Paul had been bombarded by abusive messages from Jackson, with threats that he would never see his daughter again. Hours before Macy was found dead, Jackson sent a picture of her to Paul, along with the message, An autopsy revealed that Macy had not died from sudden infant death syndrome nor accidental suffocation. The report concluded that Macy had either been smothered or had pressure applied to her neck. It was clear that it was not an accident, and with that, Cody and Jackson was charged with murder. As her trial began, she maintained that Macy's death was an accident. However, on day 5 of her trial, she sensationally changed her plea. She admitted what she had done. She had smothered Macy, and then made the call to the emergency services after her daughter had died, in an attempt to cover her tracks. Jackson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. Since the death of his daughter, Paul has been trying to rebuild his life. He was offered counseling to help with his trauma, but he said the support and love of his family saw him through his darkest days. He is determined that his daughter's memory will continue to live on, in the joy that she brought to so many people. December 31st, 2000. People from all over the globe are getting ready to ring in the new year. The first year of the new millennium has come to an end, and many are ready for new beginnings, fresh starts, and the exciting times that lie ahead. In the suburbs of Western Tokyo, a woman is trying to contact her daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren. Within just a few minutes, her world will come crashing down around her, and an investigation into one of Japan's most sinister and infamous murders will begin. Mikey Miyazawa and his wife, Yusuko, lived in the Kamiso neighborhood of Satagaya, Japan. He worked for a marketing company, and she dedicated her life to teaching. The couple were devoted to one another and shared 2 children, Nina and Ray. Nina was a bright and clever young girl. The 8-year-old was a year ahead in school and had a passion for dance. Her grandmother, Haruko, said she loved ballet and would often showcase her talents to her family. Her little brother Ray was a 6-year-old with a funny and inquisitive nature. He had special needs and required extra support, and he was adored by his family. Both children grew up surrounded by love and happiness. During the day on the December 30th, the Miyazawa family, like many others, spent their day relaxing. They went shopping, and then after eating dinner, they settled in to watch a film. Family was everything to the Miyazawas, so much so that Yusuko's mother, Haruko, lived in a house not far from theirs. She adored her daughter and son-in-law and doted on her grandchildren. Most mornings, Haruko would call the home to check in with her family, and on the December 31st, this is exactly what she did. Picking up the phone and dialing the number, something strange happened. The call wouldn't go through. The phone in the Miyazawa house had been disconnected. Haruko was immediately concerned. She went to the house but got no response. As her anxiety began to rise, she let herself into the home. Lying at the bottom of the stairs was the body of her son-in-law. He had been brutally stabbed to death. She then ran upstairs where she found her daughter and granddaughter. They too had been stabbed. As she searched the rest of the house, she found her beloved grandson in his bed. He had been strangled to death. Haruko's screams were apparently so loud, those in neighboring houses heard her cries. The police soon arrived on scene after the alarm was raised. Takashi Tashida served as an officer for 41 years before his retirement. He was a chief officer at Seiho Police Station, and they were in charge of the investigation. He and his colleagues were determined to get justice for the slain family. Takashi said that the scene was so traumatizing. The facial expressions of the family are still etched into his memory to this day. The news of the murders sent shock waves throughout Japan. Murders of this nature are extremely rare, and people could not believe that a family could be murdered in their own home in the most horrific way. When Makio's mother, Setsuko, found out that they had been killed, she said she went into such a state of shock, she blanked out. The first thing they had to determine was a point of entry. How had the killer gained access to the house? At the back of the house to the Sashigaya Park, this gave the perpetrators a different places to enter the house from whilst remaining undetected. One theory that the police thought was most likely was that the killer had climbed a tree by the house and entered the second-floor bathroom after removing the window screen. This is still, however, just a theory. The exact point of entry remains unknown. This was further complicated when Haruko initially told investigators she had used her spare key to let herself in, but then said she wasn't sure. As the door could have been unlocked, it was hard for detectives to determine exactly how the killer had gained entry. What is known is that the events that unfolded that night are nothing short of a nightmare. After entering Ray's room, the killer strangled the 6-year-old with her bare hands. Ray's father had heard the commotion and ran upstairs to investigate. Makia fought the intruder off with all his might. He was able to injure the assailant, but the attacker was armed. Using a sashimi knife, he stabbed Mikio in the head. He stabbed him with such force that part of the blade broke off. The killer then moved through the house and attacked Yusuko and Nina with a broken blade before using a santoku knife belonging to the family to stab the mother and daughter to death. The investigators believe that the killer carried on stabbing Yusuko and Nina even after they had died. Having just wiped out the Miyazawa family in the most brutal fashion, the killer did not leave. Police estimate that they remained inside the home for between 2 and 10 hours. The intruder ate food from the fridge and drank tea. They used the family first aid kit to treat the wounds they had sustained from Makio while attempting to fight them off. They used the family's computer to surf the internet at around 1:18 that morning within just a few hours of annihilating an entire family. The internet was also turned on at around 10 a.m. on the morning Haruko discovered the bodies. Whilst this could have been the killer, it could also have been accidentally triggered by Haruko when she entered the home. The killer also took a nap on the sofa in the second-floor living room. while the bodies of the Miyazawa family were scattered throughout the house. As the investigation got underway, police were able to determine several clues about the killer's identity. Before leaving the house, the killer not only left the knives used in the murder, but also several items of clothing. Investigators determined that the items had been bought in the Kanagawa prefecture. They discovered the sweater left behind was one of only 30 ever made. It was a rare piece of clothing that only a select few had. Despite this being a major lead, it would prove to be fruitless. Despite the best efforts of the police, they were only able to find 12 of the people who had bought one of the sweaters. Another item that was left in the house was a hip bag. During the analysis, trace amounts of sand were found inside. After extensive testing, sand was determined to have originated in the Nevada desert, more precisely the area of Edwards Air Force Base in California. Crime scene examiners scoured the house and were able to find fingerprints and DNA belonging to the killer littered throughout. When they were put through Tokyo's police database, it came back with no matches. Either they had no criminal record, or they weren't a Japanese citizen. It was also revealed that the killer's blood was type A, which did not belong to the Miyazawa family. The blood revealed further clues about the murderer. It was revealed that the killer was male, possibly of mixed-race heritage. The killer's maternal DNA indicated his mother was of European descent, and his paternal DNA revealed a father of East Asian origin. The Y chromosome was scrutinized, and this showed the haplogroup OM122, common amongst people of East Asian heritage, present in 1 in 4 or 5 Koreans, 1 in 13 Japanese, and 1 in 10 Chinese. International Criminal Police Organization, as the murderer could have left the country. When it came time for the funeral of the Miyazawa family, Setsuko Makio's mother said she was so traumatized that she cannot remember it. She was so stricken with grief that she had to be carried inside. The pressure was building on investigators to provide answers for the shattered family. The police released a mock-up of what the killer had possibly looked like and the clothes he would have been wearing. He was estimated to be around 5'5" and of slim stature. They also believed he was between the ages of 15 and 35 due to the physical fitness it would have required to enter the home and commit the murders. The wounds sustained by the Miyazawa family also indicated that he was right-handed. The investigation into the Miyazawa family massacre became the center of national news, and many theories started to circulate. One theory was that Mikio had been seen arguing with youth skateboarding in the park near his home, as the clothes left the scene could indicate a skater. Maybe someone had had enough of Mikio's complaints about the noise and sought revenge. It wasn't just the police who were conducting investigations. An investigative journalist named Fumio Ichihashi covered the case extensively. He wrote a book about it, and he argued that the murderer was a former soldier from the South Korean army who became a hitman. Ichihashi has said that the family was paid compensation when the park near the house had motive for the killer. He has also said that as the killer left behind not only clothes and the murder weapons, but also DNA and fingerprints, he would have had to have been sure he wouldn't be apprehended. He also believes that the initial investigation was not enough. All the special investigators for the Tokyo Police Department were working on different cases, so the reserve team was used instead. And due to it being New Year's Eve, many investigators were at home with their families, so valuable time could have been lost when sending officers to the crime scene. Investigator Shishida has dismissed these claims, calling it nonsense. The investigation into the murders of the Miyazawa family became one of the biggest in Japanese history. Nearly 250,000 officers were involved, and over 12,000 pieces of evidence were collected. Police scoured the local area with a fine-tooth comb. They interviewed friends and associates of the Miyazawa family to try and find a motive in this seemingly random case. But every lead would go nowhere. Despite the tireless efforts of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police, the countless hours spent investigating, and the very specific details they have been able to uncover about the killer, they have never been able to determine his identity, and he remains at large to this day. The detectives who worked on the Miyazawa case have since retired, but the investigators have never given up hope that the perpetrator of the Miyazawa family massacre would be brought to justice. As of February 2019, there are 35 officers assigned to the case. There is a reward of 20 million yen for any information that could help solve the murders. Every year, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Force make a pilgrimage to the house to renew their promise that the killer will be caught. Manabu Ide works for the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Special Investigative Task Force. He has vowed to carry on until the killer has been captured, and has said that his colleagues want to help the family rest in peace by finding their murderer. The house has stood empty since that fateful day, perfectly preserved. But due to its age, the police want to have it demolished. Superintendent Ide has assured that all evidence from within the house has been preserved, and tearing it down will not affect the investigation. Takashi Tashida, despite being retired, has never left the case behind. Even after his retirement, he made his own flyers to try and seek out new information, and he still visits the crime scene regularly so as not to forget the details. He remains in close contact with Mikio's mother Setsuko. Setsuko has a shrine to her son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren in her home. And whenever Tashida visits, he always prays at the shrine, promising the family he will never give up hope that they will have justice. Setsuko has the toys her grandchildren loved in a cabinet on display. She has said that her greatest regret was that she never got to see them grow up into the amazing adults they would have been. The impact of the murders is both far-reaching and irreparable. For those who investigated, they remain unable to forget the crime scene and will not move on until the killer is caught. Setsuko has said that she longs for the day she can go to the shrine in her home and tell her son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren that the person who took their lives in the most sadistic and brutal way possible has finally been caught. If you have any information relating to the murders of Mikiya Miyazawa, Yusuko Miyazawa, Nina Miyazawa, and Rei Miyazawa, then please contact the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Force. This is a story of love gone bad. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky to Lisa Carter and Jade Poston. He had 3 younger sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth Carter. He attended the International School Manila in Philippines and the International School of Geneva in Switzerland during high school. He later attended Indiana University, where he triple majored in history, geography, and political science, then went to law school at the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University in Highland Heights. Poston was a promising American attorney who was working as an attorney in Cincinnati, Ohio, and 28 years of age when he had met his supposed lover. While his lover, Shane Michelle Ubris, was born on April 8, 1991, in Lexington, Kentucky, United States, she was 19 years old when they had met. Ubors was a student at the University of Kentucky, Lexington. She was majoring in psychology. In 2011, Shauna Ubors and Ryan Poston met on Meta, formerly known as Facebook. Poston had stumbled on a beautiful profile picture of Ubors on his mobile phone while surfing the social site. He was intrigued by the beauty of Ubers, which prompted him to further check her profile. Poston was sure he wanted to be more than a friend to the person he had seen in the picture. He sent her a friend request. The duo began talking and things were going on smoothly with their conversation. During their talking stages, there were arguments, but that didn't put off the relationship as the duo were so attached to one another. The reality between the duo differed from what it appeared to the public. However, the two shared an on-again, off-again romance for 18 months, often arguing over trivial matters. Poston and Ubers' on-off relationship was noticed by friends of the duo, which helped in figuring out what transpired when things got out of hand. Something bizarre happened which turned a supposed beautiful evening into a mourning evening. During the recount of Ubors before the major incident that happened in the story, she claimed on October 12, 2012, she was in the condo of her ex-lover Poston. The duo was reported to have ended the relationship between them before the ever-mentioned date. On the said date, her ex-lover had a date with Miss Ohio USA 2012 Audrey Bolt that evening. Ubors at some point had claimed her relationship with Poston was abusive, and that was one of the main reasons the relationship with him didn't work out. On the evening Poston was to meet with Miss Ohio USA 2012 for a date, things went sour with him and Ubers, his ex-girlfriend. In the pace of the evening, Ubers claimed Poston was calling her mother stupid and crazy. She further said he called her unstable and deranged, which triggered her and she decided to leave his condo. But things didn't go as planned as it came for her as she approached the exit of the condo. Huber said Poston grabbed onto her body, onto her person with both hands. She claimed he had picked her up from an awkward angle in the house and threw her from the doorway of his bedroom into the other room to the edge of the short sofa. In the ensuing struggle, Huber said, Poston fell on her and pinned her against a footstool, thereby grabbing her hair and screaming into her left ear. She thought he was going to snap her neck because of the way he was jerking her head around. Hubers claimed all of his weight was on her at this point and there was no way for her to escape for her life. In a further recount by Hubers, she claimed Poston had pushed her against a TV in his room, but during the investigation of the crime scene, the TV set was in a perfect condition which contradicted her story. To get herself free from the pinning weight Poston had on her, she claimed to have punched him with her right arm, and when she did, it knocked the glasses off his face. She could get herself free, and the duo wrestled standing up. Hubers during her trial recount said, and pointing it at her and saying, I could just kill you right now and get away with it. Nobody would even know, she said. She was shocked and afraid at the same time. Despite Poston's words, he didn't shoot. Instead, he set the gun back on the table and continued to yell hurtful things at her. She was losing it, and to defend herself against Poston, she shot him 6 times. But what the investigator discovered was something that would leave you wondering what could have transpired between the two that evening. After Hubers had shot her ex-lover 6 times, she called the police immediately to report what had happened. She dialed 911 and told them she shot him in self-defense. After the initial report, she continued to tell the dispatcher that because he was twitching, and I knew he was going to die anyway and he was making funny noises. I shot him a couple more times, Hubers said. He was twitching so badly, and I didn't want to watch him lay there and twitch. Police on the crime scene searched and recorded all information that could help with their investigation in the case. However, what Hubers had told the investigators was contradicting to everything that was in the condo of Poston, which led the police to suspect Hubers murdered Poston in cold blood. Police brought Hubers to the police station for further questioning and interrogation. Officer Dave Fornash was the officer who interrogated her. She initially stated that she wanted an attorney, but began to share details of the murder with him. During an interview with police, she said she knew Poston would die or be seriously injured. This was referred to according to a clip that emerged from her trial. Officer Fornash stated Hubers appeared unremorseful during her recount of the ugly incident and made several morbid jokes about the murder, including telling officers I shot him right there, pointing to her nose. I gave him the nose job which he had always wanted. After the back and forth between the interrogator and Hubers, he left the interrogation room and Hubert's behavior got stranger at this point as she danced around the room, singing aloud and snapping her fingers, as she had just won a huge sum of the money from a lottery ticket. With all of Hubers' actions and what she had recounted, it was evident that she had an active motive for killing Poston, which the police couldn't find out. However, most people who had weighed in on this case believes Hubers had intentionally killed her ex-boyfriend for letting go of her and having a date with the Miss Ohio USA. In April 2015, Hubers claimed Poston was violent toward her, while the prosecution countered all she had to say with evidence that what she was saying was the opposite of what had happened. At some point, the prosecutor said that she was obsessed with the attorney. As the investigation revealed, she was sending about 50 to 100 texts per day, sometimes to her ex-boyfriend. During the back and forth, the jury concluded and sentenced her to 40 years in prison for Poston's murder. She appealed and her sentence was overturned the following year because it was revealed that a convicted felon had served on the jury, which is not allowed by Kentucky law. While she was still in prison awaiting a conclusion to the case, Hubers was granted a second trial. Nivens and other former cellmates testified about her behavior behind bars, and what she allegedly told them about Poston and his killing. One inmate, Cecily Miller, discusses Hubers' behavior after being arrested and how she never expressed remorse about killing her boyfriend. During Shauna Hubers' second trial in 2018, texts the then 21-year-old sent to her friends before she murdered Ryan Poston seemed to display an escalation in violent ideation, one that by all appearances went virtually unnoticed at the time. The prosecution brought forward witnesses who testified that Hubers sent them a text message joking that she wanted to accidentally shoot Poston at a gun range. Another witness testified that she had heard Ubers telling a coworker that she was going to kill her boyfriend. Some texts read, "and play like it's an accident," read a text, which was received by Uber's friend Christy Euler. Another one described Uber's growing rage at Poston, with Uber stating her belief in a thin line between love and hate, and that her love for Poston had turned into hate. Toward the end of their relationship, Shauna Ubers had conducted many internet searches for a woman which her ex-boyfriend had friended on Facebook in January 2012 named Audrey Bolt. Bolt, who was named Miss Ohio USA the same year, eventually agreed to meet up for a date with Poston, having ended things with Hubert at that time. According to the Cincinnati Enquirer, Hubert also added Bolt on Facebook, presumably to access more details about her. In an interview with a local Kentucky station via CBS, Bolt recalled her impression of Poston. She recalled, "Poston, it seemed, was also as excited and enthusiastic about the proposed date. But he reportedly told his stepfather, Carter, that he was struggling over how to tell the Ubers about it, effectively putting the final nail in the coffin to their year-and-a-half-long relationship. I told him to make sure that he was kind to Shauna and that he told her honestly what was going on," said Carter at Uber's second trial in 2018 per CBS, before recounting how Poston had also expressed worry that Ubers would ultimately sabotage it, describing her as always around. Tragically, Poston would be murdered by Ubers the hours before he was due to meet Bolt in person. A psychologist testified that she suffered from PTSD and borderline personality disorder, and claimed the emotional abuse and distress caused by Poston led to her violent act of murder. Ubers was convicted of murder again in 2018. This time in August 28, 2018, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 2032. In her most recent mugshot, taken in 2019, she is smiling. What do you think about this cold case? Let me have your thoughts or opinions in the comments section. Who burnt alive the Isdal Woman? In 1970, at the height of the Cold War, a burnt body of a lady was discovered in a remote part of Norway. She had taken sleeping drugs, ingested carbon monoxide, and had been burned alive, according to an autopsy. Luggage belonging to the woman was later discovered, containing money from several different countries. She was eventually detected traveling around Europe with several fraudulent passports using various aliases. A family trekking in the Isdal Valley near Bergen in western Norway came across the woman's burnt body. She was badly burned in the front and discovered with her hands lifted to her chest in a defensive stance. Personal items such as a watch, an umbrella, some jewelry, and many empty bottles were strewn about the body. Authorities believed the things were unusually positioned around the body, almost as if they were part of a ceremony. Her clothes were composed of synthetic fibers and didn't have any tags on them. Initially, it was assumed that she was in her 30s. She had eaten between 50 and 70 tablets of phenobarbital and had bruises around her neck. She had also breathed carbon monoxide and soot, indicating that she had been burned alive. Her death was considered suicide by Norwegian officials due to the lack of identifying documents and the presence of a substantial amount of sleeping tablets in her system. A few days later, a pair of luggage containing fingerprints matching the murdered woman was discovered at a train station in Bergen. Inside were wigs, makeup, clothing, eczema ointment, non-prescription eyeglasses, maps, and small sums of money from Norway, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and Belgium. 100 Deutsche Marks were also hidden inside the case's lining. Any identifying information had been disconnected, cut out, or rubbed off. Even the eczema cream, which usually included the name of the prescribing doctor on the packaging, couldn't provide a clue. The sophisticated dental work of the ISDF, as she claimed to be Claudia Tield from Brussels at one hotel. She was Elizabeth Leenhofer from a stand in another. People who interacted with her were eventually tracked down and interviewed. They all spoke of a gorgeous, stylish woman with black hair and brown eyes who was attractive, pleasant, and only paid in cash. She also wore wigs, spoke numerous languages, including French, Flemish, and English, and seemed tense most of the time. Years later, the Norwegian National Defense released information indicating the woman may have been traveling around the country watching the testing of the top-secret anti-ship Penguin missile. A fisherman had noticed the woman following the movements of Norwegian army troops. Is there any logic to this pie story? During the Cold War, Norway was a hotspot in the early 1970s. It not only shared a border with the Soviet Union, but it also assisted the United States and the United Kingdom in monitoring Russian nuclear testing and submarine warfare. Russian intelligence assets, as well as components from the CIA, MI6 and Mossad, were known to be present in the country. After seeing a sketch of the Isdal Woman in 2005, a man from Bergen came forward. He reported seeing a person matching her description, hiking on a hillside approximately an hour away from Isdal, 5 days before her body was discovered in 1970. She was dressed inappropriately for the weather and was being pursued by two males who looked southern, according to him. He told the cops what he observed, but they dismissed his claim. A section of the lower jaw of the Isdal Woman was removed and saved before she was buried. Her teeth showed traces of extensive dental surgery, which was unusual for Norway at the period. In 2017, a stable isotope examination of her teeth revealed that she was born in Nuremberg around 1930 and grew up near the French-German border. Her dental work was found to have been done in Central Asia, East Asia, Southern Europe, and South America. The case continues to pique people's interest. In 2018, the BBC World Service and the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation released a podcast called Death in Ice Valley, which delves into the death of the Isdal women in great detail. While the stable isotope study provided answers to some concerns, such as the woman's age and birth country, many more remain unanswered. Was she a saboteur? If that's the case, who killed her and why? Who was she employed by? What's more, why haven't any of her friends, family, or loved ones come forward? This is a case that might remain shrouded in mystery forever. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.